That night, the porch light was still on. Cleashindra Hall called her mom at 8 p.m. and said, "Mom, get ready to come pick me up." But just a few minutes later, she called back and said she didn't need a ride anymore. That was the last time anyone ever heard her voice. An honor student, just 18, on the verge of graduating, with her whole future ahead of her. And then she vanished without a trace. No one, not even those closest to her, knows where she went or what happened that night. This isn't a story about a crime. It's about memory, hope, and why questions that never found answers. Before we begin, if this is your first time joining us at Hidden Echoes, this is where we revisit the forgotten, the unsolved, and the people time tried to leave behind. If you believe silence shouldn't be the final chapter, hit follow and stay with us until the very end of each journey. Cleashindra Hall, or Clea as everyone called her, was the kind of daughter any parent would be proud of. At just 18, she wasn't only an outstanding student, she had a clear sense of purpose. She loved children, dreamed of becoming a pediatrician, and spent most of her time studying, working part-time, and preparing for the future. Clea lived in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, a small town where the Black community made up the majority. Her final days were filled with the usual buzz of graduation ceremonies, farewell parties, and college applications. She had just been accepted to Tennessee State University, a prestigious HBCU. She was preparing to leave home and begin a new chapter, one that would make her the first in her family to enter the medical field. But more than grades or accolades, what made Clea truly stand out was her heart. Friends described her as warm, approachable, always willing to help, and a great listener. With her gentle smile and calming presence, Clea seemed to bring light wherever she went. Neighborhood kids adored her. Teachers trusted her. Her family believed in her completely. And that's what made her disappearance so utterly unthinkable. Laurel and Richard Hall, Clea's parents, hardworking, middle-class folks who lived modestly and poured everything into raising their daughter. Laurel worked in education, and Richard was a technician. To them, Clea wasn't just their only child, she was their greatest hope. Education had always been a cornerstone in their household. Every term, Clea earned top honors. She'd never been in trouble, never skipped school, never stayed out late. When Clea asked to take a job at a local medical office, Laurel was a little hesitant at first, but agreed, trusting that her daughter was responsible enough. The office was owned by Dr. Larry Amos, someone Clea said was helping provide care for children. Her mother didn't know all the details, but she saw her daughter go to work regularly and on time. To her, Clea was steadily moving toward her dream of becoming a doctor. No one, not even those closest to her, could have imagined she'd one day disappear. When Clea didn't call back as promised, Laurel drove straight to the office. It was already closed. No lights, no sounds, just a dark, empty space. And from that moment on, the search began. Not for some weeks, not for months, but for more than 3 decades. Pine Bluff isn't a big city. It's the kind of place where folks know each other, wave hello on the street, and bring dishes to Sunday church potlucks. But like many Black communities in the American South, it has a long history of being overlooked, dismissed, and hurt by systems that were supposed to protect it. When Clea vanished, there were no alarms at first. Police assumed she was just a young woman who decided to leave. They told her family to wait 24 hours, a delay that cost them precious time and potential evidence. Still, the people of Pine Bluff didn't stay silent. They put up flyers, held prayer vigils, and got the word out in local papers. They knew Clea wasn't the kind of girl to leave without a word. And they understood that if they didn't raise their voices, this case might vanish, like so many others had, especially when the victims looked like them. In the long silence of the investigation, it was the community that kept Clea's memory alive. Each May, her family still lights candles in her name, refusing to let that name fade, not like she did. They don't ask for pity. All they've ever wanted is something simple, the truth. May 9th, 1994 started like any other day for Cleashindra Hall. It was a Monday at the beginning of a school week and also the final stretch of her senior year. Clea went to class, took part in year-end activities, and afterward headed to her part-time job at the office of Dr. Larry Amos, where she'd been working for the past few weeks. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. She was cheerful, polite, and punctual, just like always. Around 8 p.m., Clea called home. In a quick conversation, she told her mother she was wrapping up and asked to be picked up. Laurel, like she'd done before, started getting ready to drive over. But just 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. It was Clea. Her voice was still normal, but a little hurried. She said she didn't need a ride anymore. She'd get home on her own. That was the last time anyone ever heard Cleashindra Hall's voice. After that, there was silence. No more calls. Clea never came home. No text, no notes, no explanations. There had been no argument, no tension, no reason for her to leave. She simply vanished. Forever. The moment that second call ended and Clea didn't return home, Laurel felt something was wrong. This wasn't like her daughter. Clea was always on time, responsible, and would never let her mother worry without reason. By 9 p.m., with every passing minute confirming that, something wasn't right. Laurel drove straight to the office where her daughter worked. The building was shut. No lights, no sounds, no sign of Clea. The family began calling friends, neighbors, anyone they could think of, but no one had seen her. The next morning, they went to the police. But since Clea was 18, authorities refused to treat it as an emergency. They told the family to wait 24 hours. That policy, common in many places at the time, would become one of the most painful setbacks in the search. For Clea, those first hours, the most critical in any missing person's case, were lost to waiting. By the time the police finally began their investigation, it was already too late. There were no reliable witnesses, no security cameras in the area, no clear description of anyone who might have picked her up, no direction of travel, no leads, just a void, a girl who disappeared from the world, so if she had never been there. In the days following Clea's disappearance, every detail was examined, and the more people looked, the less sense it all made. Dr. Larry Amos, the man who owned the office, and the last person confirmed to have seen Clea, told police she left around 8:30 p.m. and got into a car driven by someone he didn't recognize. He couldn't recall the car's color, make, or even what the driver looked like. That raised a lot of questions. How could an adult witness something happening right in front of him and remember so little? Why hadn't Clea told anyone she'd arranged for a ride? Back at home, her purse, her phone, her wallet, all her personal belongings were still there. That didn't align with the idea that she'd planned to run away. She hadn't withdrawn any money, hadn't packed clothes, hadn't left a note. Nothing in her behavior suggested she intended to leave. The family began to suspect something was being hidden. But at the time, investigators couldn't find any direct evidence. No other witnesses had seen Clea leave the office. There were no cameras, no signs of struggle, no noise. No one came forward. And as the days turned into weeks, the silence grew, until it felt like a wall no one could break through. Still, the Hall family never stopped searching. They held prayer vigils, hired private investigators, printed flyers, and appeared on local TV. But of the thousands of people who passed through that street every day, not one knew what happened into Cleashindra Hall on that fateful night. Larry Amos was the last confirmed person to see Clea on the night she disappeared. He was the only one who could speak to what happened in those final hours at his office. According to his initial statement, Clea left around 8:30 p.m. and got into a car, a vehicle, with no visible license plate, no identifiable make or model, and a driver he couldn't describe. That account left Clea's family deeply unsettled. Pine Bluff isn't a big city. The idea that a person, and especially someone as educated and professionally trained as a doctor, couldn't recall basic details about a car that just picked up his young employee seemed hard to believe. Even more troubling, why hadn't Dr. Amos, someone supposedly working with children, taken any steps to ensure the safety of a teenage girl leaving his office at night? Still, despite the questions, there was no direct evidence linking Dr. Amos to Clea's disappearance. His office was searched, but investigators found no signs of foul play, no suspicious objects, nothing that would prove wrongdoing. What added to the confusion was the vague nature of Clea's work there. She had told her mother that the job involved children, maybe organizing educational programs or helping with office tasks. But in reality, very little was known about what actually went on inside that building. It was a private office, and no one else was present that night. No one, not even police, could verify how or if Clea really left. During the investigation, another name surfaced. A young man from the community who had once shown interest in Clea. He had spoken with her shortly before she disappeared. When brought in for questioning, he didn't refuse to cooperate. Police gave him a polygraph test, but it offered no useful leads, even without any direct evidence against him. The mere fact that someone with a romantic interest in Clea had been in contact so close to her disappearance raised public speculation. Was there a personal conflict? Could that be why Clea suddenly told her mom not to pick her up? But once again, there was nothing solid to support those theories. The young man had no history of violence. No one saw him near Dr. Amos's office that night. The case seemed to drift further into a maze of mismatched fragments. Meanwhile, Clea's family clung to hope, even as it was tested over and over. Every new lead, even a rumor or unverified tip, forced them to relive that night, only to end up back at the same place, nowhere. And slowly the case and Clea's name began to fade from public memory. Not because people stopped caring, but because years of unanswered questions wore everyone down. There was one small detail that resurfaced years later, from a neighbor who lived near the doctor's office. In an interview long after the fact, they recalled that it had rained lightly that night. They remembered seeing a car pull up in front of the building, headlights casting shadows through the curtains. But what they couldn't get on was whether Clea was in that car. That angle, while inconclusive, added yet another layer of uncertainty. It suggested someone may have picked Clea up, but no one could say who. The vagueness of eyewitness memories, the total absence of security footage or third-party verification, it all pushed the case further into a gray zone. Clea's family was left haunted by the same questions. If she was taken against her will, why didn't anyone hear anything? If she left voluntarily, and why didn't she take her phone or wallet? And if no harm was done to her, why after more than 30 years has there still been no sign that she's alive? As long as the answers remain out of reach, Clea's case stands as a symbol of what can happen when urgency is lacking, when communities are under-resourced, and when young Black lives are not protected the way they should be. But it's also a symbol of persistence, of a family that never gave up, and of a community that continues to hold on to the belief that the truth still matters, even if the path to it feels impossibly far and endlessly uncertain. As time passed, one theory after another surfaced, only to be ruled out. Hopes that Clea might have left for personal reasons, or was simply laying low after a relationship issue, quickly became impossible to believe. There were no signs of life, no bank activity, no calls, emails, or logins. No one spotted her on the street or in another city. With advancements in technology and national databases, investigators can now track missing persons more efficiently. But Clea left behind no digital footprint at all. That pointed to a far more chilling possibility, that something serious had happened and someone had successfully covered it up. Clea's family slowly began to realize they weren't just facing a mystery, they were up against the cracks in the system itself. Poor coordination, lack of urgency in those critical first hours, and limited resources may have allowed crucial leads to vanish forever. Years later, even those who originally worked the case admitted that things had been missed, not out of malice, but because of insufficient awareness capacity at the time. Meanwhile, national media paid little attention to Clea's story, something not uncommon when the missing person doesn't fit the dominant profile society chooses to spotlight. Her family had to do everything themselves, raising awareness, organizing searches, rallying the community. But each passing day without answers stretched their hope thinner and thinner. Then in 2012, nearly 2 decades after Clea vanished, a new lead emerged. An anonymous tip suggested police should re-examine the old office building once owned by Dr. Larry Amos. A search warrant was issued, and during the investigation, several items were collected for forensic testing. But none of it led to a clear conclusion. None of the samples showed a direct connection to Clea. Still, this moment forced everyone back to that original question: did something happen to Clea inside that building sometime shortly after her final phone call? If so, why did it take nearly 20 years to re-examine the scene? And what might have been lost in all that time? For Clea's family, 2012 felt like a fresh wound, reopening pain that had never fully healed. They had hoped, even after all those years, that something, even the smallest piece of evidence, might finally bring them answers. But once again, the truth slipped through their fingers. No charges, no trial, no one held accountable. And Clea, the person at the very center of it all, remained just a name without resolution. What made the Hall family extraordinary wasn't just their perseverance, but their grace in the face of chaos. They never turned their grief into blame. They didn't make baseless accusations. They chose to believe, however delayed, that the truth would come. Laurel Hall, Clea's mother, became an advocate for other families of missing children. She spoke at conferences, pushed for reform in how missing person cases are reported, especially when the victims are Black. She said, "I don't want another child to disappear without anyone noticing, without anyone looking, without anyone remembering." In a world where media attention often determines the momentum of an investigation, the Hall family chose a different kind of visibility. Quiet, steady, unyielding. They chose action over anger. And in doing so, the story of Cleashindra Hall became more than an unsolved disappearance. It became a symbol of endurance, of belief in justice, even when it feels impossibly slow, and of a love so unconditional, it refuses to let her be forgotten. Because they believe, and we believe, she still deserves to be heard, remembered, and honored, just as she was when she was here. It's been 30 years since the night Cleashindra Hall disappeared. 30 years of mornings where her mother wakes without hearing the familiar footsteps in the hallway. 30 years of evenings with the porch light left on, waiting for a door that never opens. But what people admire most about the Hall family isn't just the pain they've endured, it's how they've endured it. Not a single year has passed without a candlelight vigil in Clea's memory. Not a single holiday without a space left open for her at the dinner table. Not a single public appearance where her name isn't spoken with calm, with love, and with unwavering resolve. Laurel Hall refuses to let her daughter be forgotten. She refuses to let Clea become just another file in a stack of missing persons. To her, Clea is not a statistic. She is a person, a daughter, a friend, a dream left unfinished. That's why Laurel keeps speaking out, even when she's tired, even when hope runs thin. She never goes silent. Richard Hall, Clea's quiet father, honors her in his own way. He tends to her room, keeps her belongings just as she left them. The white shoes, the school diary, the graduation photo, all of it's still in place, as if waiting for her to walk through the door. Because to them, Clea hasn't truly vanished. She's simply somewhere, waiting to be found, waiting for her story to be told the way it deserves. Clea's story doesn't just belong to her family. It belongs to Pine Bluff, the town that watched her grow up and now must ask itself, have we done enough to protect our children? Over the years, the local community has never stopped saying her name. In memorials, school assemblies, in small town, newspapers, even if national media has looked away. In those quiet corners, Clea still echoes, a reminder that she existed, that she was loved, and that she matters as much as anyone else. Her case has also exposed a painful truth. Missing Black women often don't receive the same level of attention, resources, or urgency as others. Not because they matter less, but because of unconscious bias embedded in systems still slow to change. And yet, out of that gap, communities like Pine Bluffs have emerged as agents of transformation. They don't ask for special treatment. They ask for fairness, for a future where no child grows up fearing that if something bad happens, their voice will go unheard. They saw all of that in Clea, a young woman with upbeat dreams, with a future, and with a story that never got to reach its ending. Cleashindra Hall, that name is no longer just the name of a missing girl. It's a symbol of resilience, of unconditional love, of a society learning to listen more closely to the voices it once overlooked. Maybe Clea is gone. Maybe she's still out there in silence. But what cannot be erased is this: Clea was here. She dreamed. She tried. She was someone's hope. And that truth, whatever happened, can never be undone. To this day, no one has been charged. No one has been arrested. No formal apology has ever been issued. But each May, as candles flicker in the dark, the community speaks her name again. Not out of habit, but out of belief that as long as one person remembers, one person still asks, Clea still exists. And they wait, not for vengeance, but for answers. That's all they've ever wanted: a reason and explanation, a way to close a chapter left open too long. Until then, they live with the ache, not with hatred, not with bitterness, but with a quiet, steadfast hope that justice, however late, is still worth waiting for. And that Clea still deserves to be heard. Today, tomorrow, and always. Cleashindra Hall disappeared on a night that began like any other, but the silence that followed, the absence with no explanation, changed the lives of so many forever. Her story doesn't end in a police file. It lives on in the hearts of those who love her and in the memory of a community that refuses to forget. If you've ever waited for a message that never came, if you've ever held on to hope while the door stayed closed, if you believe stories like Clea's deserve to be told, not for shock, but because justice needs light, chirping this video. Comment "me too" if you've ever felt the ache of an unanswered question. And follow this channel so that with every story we tell, we remind the world no one should ever be forgotten. Not Clea. Not anyone.